Howdy, all you delicious people! I'm here today to review Tully. So, this movie is a movie about life, and a lot of times you'll get like an interesting, like Mr. Mom, or you might go on and just get a film that, yeah, it's just kind of like a story about life, but there's just a lot of things that you'll always kind of pull away from and just be like, oh man, did I really like that part? Or man, like I really want to go back and just rewatch this movie just for these interesting parts within this film. And this movie never really gets there. There is some slivers of things that I could pull away from and just be like, oh, well, that's nice. Oh, that's interesting. That's cool. That's this, that's that. But also, like, the main focus was me seeing Marlowe eventually, like, feeling very, like, defeated and exhausted and all this stuff where we kind of see her in the very beginning of this film and the eventual turnaround that she has at the end of this film, where it seems like she goes from this kind of very like saddened person, but then the turnaround to eventually be a much more happier um, person was like, okay, well, I liked that about it, but really, when it comes down to it, this movie is to be just so focused on Marlowe, Tully, and the baby, and there's just snidbits of other people. There's just snidbits of other people involved. And speaking of snidbits, we have this movie that really just chops a lot of stuff. Just, man, does it just like. We have these little like skit things that are kind of going on in this little bubble of movie, and then we have to kind of like loop them all together. And the eventual progression of when Tully is to be this like Whammadine like uh, night nanny, and this eventually leads to a twist happening at the very end of this movie, where we're probably thinking like, oh, so like this is going to be eventually leading to like some affair or some kind of something like all these movies normally lead to. Or I just kind of thought that there was going to be like some kind of twist eventually to, if you weren't really interested in the film, you were just interested in the twist of it all. And so, yeah. So I would say also that this movie probably requires like like a certain kind of audience that like all of this like perfectly fits them. You really would have to find a very unique enough audience to have every single bit of this just like, oh man, like this feels like my life, to like go on and win someone over. So like Tully, just for me, like was just too flat enough for me to ever want to go on and rewatch this film, even though I liked Charlize Theron in this movie. Um, like there was not enough other than that to like. So, with that said, I would have to say that this is a bad film, but there is possibly a redeeming thing about it. Like the whole thing where it seems that Marlowe is to talk about like the thing that she's watching on TV with Tully. Like I thought that was like really interesting. I thought it was like, okay, like this girl is just kind of being honest about what she's watching, and it seems that like this girl is to be interested, like, well, yeah, like that sounds like a really interesting show. And so like I thought that was like the cool part of this film. So with that said, this movie will soon be available on Netflix, hence why I wanted to just check it out and see what it was about, because even when I watched the trailer I was like, well, there might be just something here. And come to find out there wasn't enough of something. But because I feel like I've kind of seen little bits in this and stuff like that, and so it just. So with that said, let's go on into that double five time territory, because it's about that time to just go into spoilers about this movie. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time we get to spoil this movie. So, so we go on, and at the very beginning of this film, we have Marlowe, who is to be brushing Jonah, because Jonah is Marlowe's son, and he is to be an atypical like special needs kid. I want to go on and try to um, like be like very nice about that, because like really going on, it's like you have this kid who is like getting like a very difficult time going throughout his day, and eventually it just gets to the point where when Marlowe is to speak with certain people at Jonah's school, they're going on to like, well, like this kid is really just being like too difficult for us. And it's just like, really? Well, then come up with something for this kid to be able to get his education. Hence why we go to this school thinking that someone is going to go on and help this kid through. So, but anyways, so we have Marlowe, who is to go on and is to rarely ever see her husband in this movie. It's just like, oh hey honey, I'm leaving for work, kiss, smooches, and whatever. And then at some points Drew is just kind of gone, being out of town because his job is very hard to explain. He's like an auditor, and that's about all that I really could understood. Because he said a bunch of jibber jabber afterwards, where it's like, oh, it's just one of those jobs where you like, it's very hard to explain. So Marlowe is now already have 2 kids, and she has she's pregnant, and so Marlowe is going on and taking her kids to work, and so it seems that there's a difficulty with just a parking spot, and so Marlowe is saying like, well, I guess we need to go to the other parking lot, and Jonah is starting to kick this seat and just getting really upset because like, no, it has to be this parking lot. And so Marlowe just has to go on and wait for someone to get out of this parking lot for her to come in and take this parking spot to just get her kids off to school. So Marlowe is to go on and speak with this girl named Lori, who is to go on and tell Marlowe that Jonah is being such a handful that they require Marlowe to have Jonah have an aide being put into classes to help him out. And Marlowe's like, well, that's great. Like, thank you for going on and taking a special interest in my son. And Laurie's like, oh, no. Like, we need you to go on and find this aide character and bring him into our school. And you're going to be paying for this person to help your son get educated because our teachers just can't handle your son anymore. And Marlowe's like, okay. So Marlowe is already just like, wow, okay then. So Marlowe is to go on, and probably the only real reason why Marlowe is even to have her kids in this school is really just because her brother Craig is to kind of give them money, this family money, to go on and be able to afford these kids going to this school. So, speaking of which, Marlowe is to go on and make her way home, and eventually Drew is to come home and like, oh, hey, honey. And so they're going on, and Drew's asking Marlowe, it's like, well, hey, like, have you brushed Jonah? And Marlowe's like, yeah. And it's like, okay. So Marlowe and Drew are to go on and meet up with Marlowe's brother, and Drew's like, I don't like that guy. Like, I don't like him. And so Drew is to go on with Marlowe to Craig and Alice's place. And so we go on and we have them talking, and so it seems that Craig is to want to offer Marlowe a possibility for her to go on and have this night nanny, because Ellis was to mention about her pregnancy, and when she reached 9 months she couldn't go to the gym. And I'm like, man, that's just gotta feel like a crappy thing to honestly just say to somebody. It's like, oh, well, yeah, like, once I reached 9 months, I couldn't even go to the gym. It's like, you're having a baby. You're having a child. Why would you why would you stop? Why would you try to be like all trim and thin and whatever? Like, I get it that maybe like you want to kind of bounce back from your pregnancy and like be the most energetic you can possibly be for your child, but still. So, and it seems that Marlo is going to be having this baby soon, like within days. And so Craig is to offer up this, like, hey, here's this night nanny. Like, it really had gone on and helped us. And so, like, all Marlo needs to do is just kind of wake up to do the feedings and really like the nanny will take care of everything else. And so Marlo is like, well, no, like, I think I can handle this. And Craig is like, no, I think you really need someone. I think you need help. Like, I think you need someone to help you. Like I'm just putting out there. Like, I just wanna help. And so Marlo's like, I don't know. So Marlo is to go on and like at some point it feels that she's close to reconsidering going on and having this night nanny, because Marlo is going on and driving her kids to work, and we just continue to have Jonah who's kicking the seat consistently, and like Marlo is, please, like, could you not kick my seat? Could you not? So, and like this kid just keeps going on and doing what he's doing and stuff like that. So Marlo is to go on and again meet with this girl Lori at this school. And so even with Jonah having this aid, which Marlo's like, well, yeah, like we put forth the money for this aid, and like I think things are going well, and Laurie's like, well, yeah, about that. And Laurie's just like, and Marlo is just like, well, what do you got this time? So Laurie is telling Marlo that, yeah, like, I just don't think that Jonah is fit for the school. Like, I think that he needs to go on to another school because I just think it's just not working. And Marlo's like, so is that what you just do with difficult, like, kids? Do you just send them off elsewhere because you don't want to freaking deal with them? And Marlo's going on saying, like, the only reason why, like, you people were even to have me come into this school with my kids is because my brother was to fund money into you people, and that's the only reason why that my kids are here. And also Marley at this point is just so upset with Lori. She is saying how like just horrible she feels after she leaves with these meetings with Lori, and like the upset that she is right now is this stuff that Lori doesn't see because Marley usually tends to hide all of it until she gets out of here. And so Dallas is coming in just like, oh, hey, late. And like Marlo's like, no, like I'm going to get out of here myself. Like, I'm just going to get out of here. So Marlo is at her car and she is just like flipping out. She's screaming, and she gets back in her car and she's just flustered. And so we finally go on and have Marlo, who is just at a point now where she's just like, you know what, I need I think I need a night nanny. Like, that's when it happens. And because Marlo is going on and her water is to break, and Drew and Marlo are to get to the hospital, and and she has the baby, and they go off to uh, eventually have Marlo go on and doing diapers for the baby and all this stuff, and at some point it just feels like she's exhausted. It's some like she has had like a trail of diapers that kind of follow her around because they're all taped together, and she doesn't realize it. I'm like, oh my god, oh my god, Marlo. So Marlo is to finally tell Drew, it's like, I think we need to call that night nanny. And Drew is like, well, I thought that you weren't interested in it. And Marlo's like, I think we need, and like Drew's like, okay, like, all right, like, whatever you need. So, like, Drew is like a person that is to like be a very reasonable guy. Like, it's not like Drew is like, no, I want this and I want that, because he's never really home. So it's like for him, like he's just like, well, like I'm never really here anyways. So, and then he realizes that by the end of the film, where it's like, well, yeah, I guess I realized that I'm not home enough, or I'm not like here enough, and that Drew is to realize that between work and then coming home, like he's just so just burnt out and whatever at the end of this movie. But so Drew is to go on and again just kind of vanish for I don't know however long. And so Marlo is to have this night nanny called Tully come in. And so, like, in the first early stages, we have Marlo who is watching this, like, male gigolo show, and she's really enjoying it. And plus, also, there's some scenes of people having some bedroom business together, and let's just say creatively. And so Marlo's watching on at this, and so when Tully comes in one night, she's like, "Oh, what's this show?" And Marlo's like, "Oh no, like let's not." Like Tully's like, "No, like tell me what the show is. Like just say what it is. It's okay. Like there's no judgment here because Tully is to be this very understanding person." And so when Tully first comes in here, Tully's telling Marlo, it's like, well, I'm not just like taking care of your baby, like I'm taking care of you. Uh, and Marlo's like, what do you mean by that? And Tully's like, well, like basically because your kid, like there's like certain genes um, that are like from you, and that also there's some DNA that is still going to be inside of you from your baby. And so, like, yeah, so I'm basically taking care of you. So Tully is to go on, and Marlo, like the first time that they meet, is like, "Well, how old are you?" And she's like, 26. It's like, okay, like Tully's like, "Yeah, I get that all the time." And so, and Marlo is to mention that her baby is to like be named because it's a very popular name, and Tully's like, "Well, like it's a great name, so just don't even go with the popular crap." So, so Marlo goes on and is to tell Tully about the show that she's watching, and Tully's like, "Oh, okay, like, well, I'll go on and I'll check it out, and maybe at some point, maybe I'll be one of like your characters that you like." And so it's like, okie dokie. So Tully at points is talking to Marlo, and is to ask her like, well, hey, what kind of like if you weren't tired or exhausted or whatever, like what kind of mom would you want to be? And so Marlo's like, well, like I want to be those kind of moms that go on and like make cupcakes with minions and stuff on it for their kids, and like I want to go on and like do all this stuff that I just don't have the energy to do. And so Tully's like, oh, okay, all right, like that seems reasonable. So when Marlo is to wake up the next day, she is to see these cupcakes that Tully's to make. And so Marlo is to kind of bring these cupcakes to this class. So Marlo is confronting Lori and is like, you know what, like I came here with like a cupcake as a peace offering. Like, sorry, like we're just gonna go on and go to this alternative school for my son, and that's what we're gonna do. So Marlo is to take her kid Jonah to this school, and Jonah has to go to the bathroom, and he's just concerned if the toilet flushing is going to be too loud. And Marlowe's like, well, I don't think the toilet's going to be too loud. And then when Jonah is to hear the flush of the toilet, he covers his ears. So Marlowe is rushing to Jonah because Jonah, of course, is screaming about the toilet being too loud. So Marlowe is to take him and try to calm him down, and all of a sudden we have this one teacher that just comes in and he's like, well, hey, how are both of you? And so he's like, hey, how about we both like just become a tree for a moment? And I'm like, wow, like this teacher is so cool. And we have this teacher that goes on, and he's like, well, like he does these like yoga poses, and he does a thing like a tree, and he's gonna shake the tree. He's very animated, and so like the kid ends up doing it, even the mom is kind of doing it. Um, and so he's like, well, yeah, like you guys have a nice day, and then he just kind of walks off. It's like, well, yeah, like that's just the way to just kind of calm a kid down, is just go on and try to just be like another kind of character for like a minute or two. And so Marlowe's like, wow, this school is really interesting. And so Marlowe is to take Jonah to the school, and it seems like things are working out. So Marlowe is to go on and consistently wake up with these feedings, and so when Tully is to go on and see Marlowe like feeding her kid, Tully's just kind of waiting until she's done, just kind of like, okay, like I'll just kind of wait until like I'll just kind of wait it out. So Marlowe is speaking with Drew, and Marlowe is saying like, man, like this nanny is something else. Like it's completely different than I thought she would be. And Drew is like, well, like I can really see like how like she's really like bringing a change for you. So it's like, can we keep her? And so like both of them are just kind of a lot more happier, and it seems like Marlowe is to be very fulfilled with Tully. And so we go on, and so these two characters are very happy with one another. We have Marlowe, who at some point is to go on and while she was pregnant, she was going to this place and ordering this muffin and this like decaf coffee. And this one woman is like, well, you know that even with decaf coffee, there's still some caffeine in there. And Marlowe's like, well, I'll still have the caffeine. She's like, like the grumpy woman is like, I don't think you should have. Like, so Marlowe just drinks the stuff, and she's like, God, if there could just be one thing where there isn't just one person who is not telling Marlowe what to do, she would be freaking fantastic. So we go on further into this film, and so like Tully is even asking Marlowe like about her relationship, and like it seems that that Marlowe is to realize is like, well, yeah, like nobody's been playing in my hole for a while. So like Tully's just asking Marlowe about her relationship as they're going on in this jacuzzi, and Marlowe's like, well, we haven't been together in months, and like just like we're just two ships passing into the night, like Marlowe's sleeping, and Drew is kind of staying up playing like zombie video games. And so like, yeah, like that's just like that's just our life, that's just our arrangement. And so Tully's like, well, like what do you think that you need to just kind of like spice things up? Like what is Drew like? And so Marlowe is to have this story about like some restaurant outfit that Drew used to work at, and used to like how the women were dressed there. And so at one point Marlowe was to get the costume to just kind of wear for Drew. And we go on, and Tully's like, well, can I just put on the costume? And Marlowe's like, sure, go on. So Tully puts on this costume, and I thought it was funny, and is to wear this, and is to wake up Drew. And it seems that they are going to eventually just kind of play around for a little bit. And like Drew the next morning is like, "Were we even going to talk about what happened last night? It was great, but like, are we even going to talk about it?" And Marlo's like, "No, I don't think we'll have the time." And Drew's like, "Oh, okay, all right." So we go on further into this movie, and so Marlo is to have one heck of a time with Tully, and then it seems that Tully is to go on and come to this place, and she's kind of all out of sorts. She's upset. It seems that the roommate that she is with is not like this new man that is to come to this place. And so Tully is just grabbing this food, and she's just like, I'm eating upset. And so Marlo's like, well, wait a minute, like, what's going on? And so like Marlo's like wanting to like know what's going on with Tully because of how important their technical relationship is. So Marlo and Tully are like, well, hey, like, how about like you and I? How about we just go on and just have a ladies' night, just a night out, and like everything will be fine. Like, let's just go on and just go to a bar somewhere. And this is all while Drew is like he might have been sleeping, not quite sure. But so I think he might have been like at work or something like. So Marlo and Tully go out to this bar and they have a really good time. And it gets to the point where like Marlo's chest like hasn't been milked, so she's full, and so she's having problems just trying to like figure out how to train herself. And so Marlo is to go back to the place that she used to live at before and kind of reflect on how things have changed. And so Tully is to finally break it to Marlo that Tully is to want to go on and leave Marlo and her family. Because Tully was to say that she was going to only be here for a temporary time, and she feels that that time is up. That this time there's a whole reason for her wanting to leave, and Marlo's saying like, well, like you're 26, like at some point like things aren't going to go well for you, like things are going to droop or drag or drop or whatever. And so Marlo is just getting upset. She's grabbing this bike and she just wants to make her way back to her car so they can just both get the heck out of there. So while Marlo and Tully are in this car, like they're both like trying to stay awake for how drunk they are. And so Marlo is to eventually fall asleep at the wheel and get into a car wreck. And Marlo is in this water and she's drowning. And then all of a sudden we have Tully, who is now a mermaid, because Marlo was to see this mermaid on this kids show before. And so all of a sudden Tully is now this mermaid who is rescuing Marlo from this car. And so Marlo is to get out of this accident and she's to make it to this hospital. And now Drew is talking to this nurse and this doctor, this nurse. And so this doctor is going on and telling Drew, it's like, well, like, have you at all gone on and noticed your wife having any kind of like mental issues, mental problems, mental illness of any sort? And Drew was like, no, I don't know what you're talking about at all. And so it seems like seems like Marlo has been having like sleep deprivation and like all these kind of problems. And Drew is like, I didn't even know. Like, I wasn't even sure. I wasn't even aware. So, coming to find out, we start to see scenes where Marlo is with Tully, but instead Marlo is gone in every or Marlo is to have all these scenes with Tully without her being in them. So Tully has been this imaginary friend this whole time to Marlo, keeping her going and having her change from this like upset person to this now happy person. And so Tully was just this delusion to get Marlo through this period of time, kind of like Lars and the Real Girl, to where at the very end of this, we have Drew, who's now in this hospital, talking to Marlo and mentioning, like, well, hey, like, I know that I've kind of just been, like, burnt out with work and everything like that, and I haven't really been here, but, like, hey, like, I love us, and I'm, like, here for us. And Marlo's like, well, I feel the same. And so both of them kind of hug it out, and, like, they're just going to kind of work through what they're going to work through. And so at the very end of this movie, also, we have Jonah and Marlo going on to have this moment where Marlo's going to brush Jonah again, and Jonah is telling Marlo, it's like, well, you know what? I don't think I need to be brushed now. Like, I don't think I need this now. And Marlo's just like, well, okay. And so Jonah is hugging Marlo, and like that's how the movie just kind of ends with it seemed like things are like getting to a much more positive way about things. And so it seems that Marlo is to have this happy ending at the end of all this. So with that said, I think that's all that I wanted to say about Tully. So go on and see a film if you want to. But at the end of the day, I think that's all I have to say about Tully. So I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Really, I also want to say that, again, this might have just been for a specific audience or just a certain kind of people, and maybe they would enjoy this movie a lot better. It just, like, there was something about it where I was just like, I was hoping that this movie would have some kind of something, and, like, the only thing really interesting about it is the kind of imaginary friend at the end of this, where we find out that Tully was really doing all of this and like wasn't even realizing it. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.